stop and say, okay, we have all this baggage of the existing business, but just for a mental exercise, if we were going to take everything we have learned and start over fresh, what would it look like? And we came up with this idea of, at the time we called it Zimride Instant. But I was so annoyed that everyone kept thinking I named the company after myself. So I said, let's try something else. Let's try, and an intern actually came up with the name Lyft. And then that was an experiment. And it was very risky. We, at the time, Uber had launched before we launched Lyft, but they were doing black cars and limos. So no one had done anything with personal vehicles before.
Right.
And there, two things. Your parents.
And they weren't doing sharing either, were they? At that time, you guys came up with the idea of sharing.
About getting multiple people in the same car, which we call Lyft line.
Yeah.
But your parents, when your kids tell you two things: don't take rides with strangers, and don't take candy from strangers.
Yes.
And we were trying to get people to do both because our drivers had a lot of times gum that they were giving out to their passengers. So
how did you build that trust? That was one of the questions I wanted. How did to go from something that goes against the grain like that? How did you do that?
So the first thing we did is we sat in a car. A few of us, there was probably 20 people at the time in the company, and 3 or 4 of us sat in a car and thought about the social norms that had been created. And if you think about it, if you rewind 5 years where the idea of Lyft is crazy, but people were comfortable getting into a car that was painted yellow, right? A taxi.
Yes.
Or a car that was black.
Oh, that's why you put the mustache on?
Yeah. So we had to create a Lyft. It had to be different than a Honda Accord.
Right.
We had to create an identity, and we wanted to personify the vehicle. We wanted to make people smile at the same time and create kind of word-of-mouth marketing.
Yes.
And so the mustache was an idea to say, it's so absurd that, and we're not hiding, that it will get people to talk about it. And then hopefully when they'll talk about it, they'll hear more about what we do. At the beginning, before there were regulations for what we did criminal background checks. We did driving record checks, and we had $1 million insurance policy on every driver for every ride.
Wow.
And so we knew safety was critical, but we also wanted to create an entirely new experience. And so in the early days, we called it Lyft, your friend with a car, because that was something people were used to. Oh, my friend with a car, he picks me up at college or picks me up and gives me a ride. That was less of a jump than I think what we were actually doing.
How long before Lyft took off? And give us kind of a feel. So what were some of the challenges that you had? Because you 5 years basically, obviously with Zim, and then you make the shift. Maybe ask a question first. How did you know it was time to make a shift? Just how long should someone stay on with what's not working? Where does persistence drop off, and where does intelligence drop in from your perspective?
Yeah. So in this case, within the first month, we had to create a wait list for passenger demand. Wow. We didn't have enough drivers to fit all the demand we were getting.
Wow.
So it was very different from Zimride. But the scary thing was there was a lot of legal questions, and there was a lot of challenges obviously in building any business.
Yes.
I had a headache for a month, literally. I went to the doctor to see what was going on. It was the stress of realizing that I needed to let go of Zimride, and we needed to make a hard decision and say we're going to stop because we were so passionate about making it work.
Yes.
And so we eventually.
But you really just changed the offer to some extent, right? It's the same conceit.
Yeah, but we had 150 clients that we were selling Zimride to universities and companies as kind of replacing their bulletin board that they had for sharing rides with an online system that they were paying us maybe $10,000 a year for. So we had to either shut it down, and I didn't want to let down the clients, or sell it. We ended up selling it to Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and the money went into the Lyft bank account.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Cool. And then tell us about, I know you got $2.6 billion in funding. You're worth, they're now valued, I think, $7.5 billion. Is that right?
Yeah.
Give me a hand for that. That's pretty extraordinary. That's unbelievable. Thank you. When did you first, did you self-fund in the beginning? When did you start to bring capital in? How did you decide when you were going to do that? And how did you deal with the ideas of what dilution might look like and so forth? I'd just like to know your psychology around that.
Yeah, so we raised capital the entire time from investors. We'd probably raised about $10 million, $20 million for Zimride. And then with Lyft, about 3 years ago, so Lyft is 5 years, but 3 years ago, we had raised significant money, a couple $100 million, but we had about $100 million left in the bank. And at that current burn rate at the time, about 5 months left. And Uber had 30 times the amount of cash as us. And they were trying to kill us with capital.
Yeah.
That was the most precarious moment. Because we had some success, and there was a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves to continue to deliver on this mission, and we had different kind of values and way about it than our competitor.
Yes.
But they were trying to shut us out with capital, and so I went out on the road for about a year on a quest to raise $1 billion and ended up doing it.
Very nice. Awesome. Give me a hand for that. That's amazing. What was the secret to raising it? If you had to pin a couple things down, what made you successful in raising the capital? Because everybody goes out to raise it, not everybody succeeds. And there are a lot of proven principles out there. Uber was already up and running, obviously, at this point, right? So what was the secret for you?
Yeah, I'd say the secret on raising capital and in the persistence that we've had with the business was just we cared so much.
Yeah.
We cared so much, and we care so much now about taking care of the people involved in our business and delivering on the mission.
Yes.
And that's why we're doing it. We're not doing it for the money. We're not doing it for anything else. We want to deliver on this mission.
Yes.
And
beautiful. Give him a hand. Absolutely.
And that there are, you might think there are a lot of investors that just care about money, that those exist. But there are people that see that and hear that and believe in that and want to invest in that. And that's how we got there.
Same core from the beginning. You want to light people up. That's beautiful. Make them happy.
Yeah.
What's the role that you play versus your partner, and how did you guys delineate that?
Yes. So my co-founder is our CEO, and I'm the president. We both co-lead the company. To build the world's best transportation, we believe that you need both technology and hospitality. So he focuses on the technology, and I focus on the hospitality. So that could mean marketing, communications on my side, government relations, and on his side, product and engineering and operations.
What's been one or two of the biggest challenges that you guys have dealt with successfully, and how did you figure out the solutions?
I'd say that the two were the legal question, the regulatory question around Lyft, and the fundraising piece. Mm-hmm. And so that first one, the regulatory piece, we had this board meeting. It was Zimrat at the time, and we said, hey, we want to do this. We have this idea. We're going to pick people up in other people's cars. And the board's just like wide-eyed open, like, what is wrong with you guys? and they even questioned whether people would do it. And so we said, look, we believe people will do this, and we're going to solve for the regulatory environment. We're going to self-regulate ourselves, basically, and put all these, as I mentioned, all these safety requirements on ourselves. Yes. So that was one of the ways we solved for it, because then when we got, I guess in the first couple of months of Lyft, we received several cease and desist orders from the local government, from the California state government.
For competing with the taxi service, or what was the mindset?
Yeah. So there wasn't a regulatory category for what we were doing, and so they said that we were not legal, and there was underlying, questions about was it because we were being competitive with the taxi industry. And so we went into the regulators, and I said, here's what we're doing. Here's why we care about it. Here's the safety standards that we're doing anyway, and just want to understand, are you concerned about us competing with an existing industry, or are you trying to protect public safety? And they said public safety. And then I had a piece of paper and I said, great, here's what you require of taxis and limos, and here's what we do. The majority of which was